You're watching the PoliticIt podcast.
Good evening. Welcome to PoliticIt podcast. I'm Senator John Johnson, and today we've got Andrew Sandstrom with us with the American Energy Leadership Institute. Nice to have you, Andrew.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about you to start with. Let's talk about your background, where you went to school, and how did you get into this?
Sure. So, to take you way back, I guess for someone as young as me, way back, but
right.
When I first went to my first year of college was at Southern Utah University. And
you got to talk about Weber High School, too.
I do. So I, from Pleasant View originally, grew up about half mile away from Weber High School, went to high school with your son.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. And so after that, before I went and served a church mission, I went to Southern Utah University for a year and, made the decision, maybe an advisable decision, to study political science. And while I was there, I say that tongue in cheek. I've really enjoyed that study. But when I was down there, I got exposed to public lands issues for the first time. And at the time, at least in 2011, all you could hear about at these town meetings and these party meetings were prairie dogs. And that's when I was introduced to the intersection between some of our public lands communities and environmental policy. So went on a mission, came back, transferred to Brigham Young University. And while I was there, I had a friend who was working for the Trump administration. And one day I got a call saying, would you like to come watch the president speak in the Capitol, reissuing a declaration for Bears Ears National Monument? So when I was there, I had already been thinking a lot about, in my degree, I had already been thinking a little bit about environmental policy. And when I was there, I saw two different worlds. So I came in and I saw the protest that was going on outside. Now, are you familiar with the protest that day?
Oh, yeah.
I had things told to me about where I should go and what I should do that I've never had that level of profanity thrown at me in my life for just attending an event. It was, I know there were other parts of that were positive experiences for people, but for me it was a very negative experience. And then when I got inside the building, I appreciated what the president was doing there, and I think that what Secretary Zinke was doing was actually a good direction for where the monument needed to go. But what I missed in there was I wanted to see a conservative vision for what conservation looked like, environmental policy looked like, and what public lands management looked like. So I made that sort of my pet project at BYU.
That's cool. That's one of the things I love about John Curtis is John Curtis really has kind of that same idea of how do we bring those things together, and how do conservatives have a seat at that table? Yeah,
and if you're not, and Senator Curtis loves to say, if you're not at the table, you're going to be on the menu, right?
Yeah.
He was actually mayor at the time when I was at BYU, so I knew him through BYU College Republicans. And kind of similar to him, I've engaged in climate policy a lot. And there was a time when you weren't allowed to say the word climate as a Republican, and that time has sort of changed, and we've been able to, forge new paths and having uniquely conservative approaches to environmental challenges. And so it's been great to be a part of that. I've engaged in youth-based campaigns relating to environmental policy. You mentioned the American Energy Leadership Institute, which is Chris Johnson's group. I'm an advisor on that. And we want energy abundance in America, and we'd also like to be competitive with China. A lot of the biggest environmental problems in the world right now are coming from the way that global supply chains go through China and the way that they abuse the environment, take advantage of us. And we explore some ways to solve those problems and hold them accountable, and it's really fulfilling work to be involved in.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, so I host a podcast called the Public Lands Policy Podcast. I've only done a few episodes, but I've had folks on. Essentially, the podcast was an answer to the question of what do I do with all of these great relationships that I've made in environmental policy that I just don't have anything, what can I do with these relationships? How can I help other people hear the stories that I've heard working in environmental policy? So brought on several folks from either environmental NGOs or Representative Celeste Malloy came on for an episode and talked about permitting reform.
Yeah, she was the chief for Chris Stewart.
Yeah,
and has been working on those issues for a long time. Did you know her back then?
No, I did not. So
Okay.
actually, I did go, so because of my Bears Ears experience, I went on a field trip. It was actually a study abroad to southern Utah from BYU. And we went to Bears Ears, we talked to county officials, tribal officials, we talked to the Park Service at Grand Canyon National Park, and sort of got a broad array of views on how public lands work. And I went to the first half of that field trip, which was in Utah, and the second half was in Europe. She did not go to the first, she went to the second. So actually, we missed each other like ships
In
in
that
the night.
one, okay.
But no, I've known her through doing work with Young Republicans and being in meetings. And like most of Utah's delegation, she's just a fantastic person, and she really knows the issues on public lands.
One of my good friends up at Utah State, well, two of them actually, Randy Simmons and Chris Fossen, actually formed a group called Strata, and they worked a lot. Yeah, they worked a lot with that whole Bears Ears thing.
And I had to study some strata studies when I was at BYU. And it was great to see a think tank that was, there's not a lot of heterodox environmental policy. There's a lot of marching in line towards the same glorious future. And you need diversity of thought in any policy field. And strata added that.
And that's what's interesting, with your comment before about, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu.
Well, and even just from a policy perspective, if everybody's marching in the same direction, you don't get the breadth of ideas you need. I mean, a lot of, maybe you can't call them mainstream environmental groups, but we'll call them very well-funded environmental groups, spend a lot of budget suing forest restoration projects, right? There was the Aspen project in the Uinta National Forest, right? If anybody likes hiking in the Uinta Mountains, right? There was going to be a forest restoration project that was going to include taking out some trees, leaving some trees and killing some trees and doing some controlled burns. All necessary. The Forest Service took years to produce that plan, shot down by a lawsuit in seconds. And now that project's not going to happen because the Forest Service, it's so hard to fight these things. Right. They end up not fighting them. And
we can actually take a lot of the fires in California back to
forest management.
Yeah.
And to be fair, we shouldn't blame the forest managers for that. We should blame the environmental groups that are making it hard for these federal agencies to do their job. And a lot of environmental NGOs are spending the money people are donating to them, sometimes a majority of that money, on these lawsuits that are making the environment worse. So I think that's when you don't have a diversity of voices in a movement, right? And I will say there are plenty of people decrying that kind of behavior. But at least if you're not in the know in environmental policy, if you're just watching the news, you don't always get both sides of the story or all sides of the story. And so I think it's really important for conservatives to engage, and not just engage in environmental policy, but make it a priority. Everyone wants clean air, clean water, open lands, places to recreate. They want to hand things down to their kids, and I have 2 kids, right? I want them to have a better world than I had. And everybody wants that. Don't just engage in it, but also make it a priority. Make it a legislative priority and a policy priority, and figure out what's a conservative vision for this. And I think that's something that for a long time we might have neglected a little bit as a party, but that era is changing, and we're starting to ask questions. What's our vision for the environment and our vision for conservation?
Very good. We're going to take a break, and we'll come right back.
Tired of media bias? Frustrated by political noise? PoliticIt.com cuts through the clutter, giving you real facts, clear analysis, and unbiased insight on the issues that matter most. Stay informed, stay empowered. Whether it's elections, policy changes, or breaking news, we've got you covered. No spin, no agendas, just truth you can trust. Visit PoliticIt.com today, because informed citizens shape the future. PoliticIt.com, where politics meets clarity.
Welcome back to PoliticIt. We're here with Andrew Sandstrom. So nice to talk to you. I want to go back to these environmental issues, because I can't get out of my head the statement you made that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? So where are you going with your movement and what you're trying to do?
So let me tell you a few priorities that I have, and one really matters here in Utah, and it's critical minerals. Right now, when you're thinking about the future of the environment, you don't usually think about mining things out of it. But in terms of an energy future, we have, as you know, because the legislature has really prioritized energy recently.
In fact, I have a recent blog I just wrote about this.
Yes, you did on critical. Yeah. I was reading that right before I came in, and we have a moment where we need to we really need to prioritize building out energy infrastructure. And that includes needing to use a lot of what we call critical minerals. And critical minerals aren't always rare. But the problem with critical minerals is if a mineral is critical, it's something that's important for the economy, and it's something that we rely on some external economy for, and very often that's China. And China has very deliberately manipulated the system so we're reliant on them, right? This isn't where everybody's playing Monopoly and it's a free market and we're playing by the rules. No, we're playing Monopoly and China's there cheating.
Right.
And we're trying to figure out how to deal with that. Because with certain materials that you need to build energy infrastructure, we're completely reliant on China in some cases. Utah has 40 of the 50 critical minerals listed by the Department of the Interior, and many of those...
Not only do we have the mines, we also have the capabilities of processing it too.
Absolutely. All 40 of those minerals don't have historic production in Utah, but I think it's something like 20 or 21 of them do. And there's different lists of what a critical mineral is, but the point is, so much of what America needs, we've got right here. And so it's of great interest to me to make sure that we're developing that and that we're doing that sustainably, because there's sort of two aspects to environmental policy. You have local environment, I mean, there's so many aspects,
right.
But sometimes, and people don't appreciate sometimes how often these two are in competition, there's concerns about climate and there's concerns about local environment.
Right.
And
the raw natural resource too, right? The idea that if we mine, we're messing up something. Right.
And you need, if you want cleaner energy, right? And energy continues to get cleaner. America has a great track record for cleaning up our air. And I could show you reports where if you make something in the United States, it's sometimes 3 or 4 times cleaner than if you outsource it to China. And so if we're going to be moving forward with building out energy infrastructure, which we need to, and we need base load clean power, like geothermal, like nuclear, we're going to need to develop the resources here, right? Utah is leading in uranium development. We're going to need that for nuclear.
Right.
We're also leading in geothermal. Now that's less about the minerals and more about getting the technology there.
Right.
And digging.
Well, you know, I was reading a story the other day where, you know, Kennecott, for instance, we've got all these tailings sitting up there. You know, the idea of having cleaned these up, but we have critical minerals there. We could actually be processing that.
We do, and Rio Tinto's started to prioritize that and to also use that mine for critical minerals. The uranium that's coming out of the White Mesa Mill in southeastern Utah, that's also producing vanadium now, which is a critical mineral. So there's a great potential here there's a great potential here in Utah to help meet and lead what the United States needs. And I want to make sure we meet those needs and that we meet them sustainably, because it's really vital. And it's vital, people don't realize this, but it's vital for the future of the environment, because when I talk about how there's the local side and then there's the climate side, you want to talk about polluters, right? Go to a steel plant in Inner Mongolia.
Yeah.
Everybody should Google, there's a photographer who went to Inner Mongolia and took pictures of a steel plant. It looks like, and this is a silly example, but if anybody's seen the Disney movie Meet the Robinsons, and there's this dystopian world that's what that steel place looks like. It looks like a dystopian future in a children's book or a children's movie.
Right.
Drive up to Plymouth, Utah, and look at the steel company there. Right. Totally different.
All recycled.
Yeah, and you could look at a picture of Nucor steel up there in Plymouth, and you can see the Bear River next to it. It looks beautiful. It looks just totally different worlds. Now I realize that there's differences between the factories,
right.
But if you look at the data on steel in the United States versus steel in China, and basically any other product, we make it way cleaner. So if we're going to be doing supply chains here in the United States, instead of bringing everything over from China, we're going to be improving global emissions drastically.
Right. Well, and I think that's the thing that's missing on a lot of people, right? In fighting some of these things, having the understanding that we're doing a better job than other people are at it, and that this is also of interest to our national security.
Absolutely.
Right.
We have weapons technologies that we're dependent on China for the minerals for. We have optics and other technologies we use right here at Hill Air Force Base that we are dependent on Chinese supply chains. what happens if there's conflict with China? Now, I pray that never happens.
Right.
But that's a bad situation for the United States. So,
well, there was an announcement the other day that kind of caught my attention, and that was the military investing, what, $200 billion?
I saw that in your article.
Right, and that really bothered me at first, because I thought, oh, we're just a bunch of socialist, communists, what's government doing taking over industry? And then I realized that these are national security issues, right? Very different. And the way that deal was structured, I thought was a whole lot better, right, in terms of the way we do that. So again, we need someone at the table.
Well,
right?
and that was for rare earths, right?
Right.
And you don't know what rare earths are, go use your washing machine and it's spinning with magnets, and those magnets, we rely on China for that.
Right.
If you're driving an EV, we rely on China for that. If you're building a windmill for wind power, we rely on China for the products that go into that turbine. So you're going to see a lot more of the United States, and I've especially seen this with the Trump administration, prioritizing not just rare earths, which are part of critical minerals, but not all of them. You're going to see prioritizing rare earths, and you're going to see prioritizing critical minerals. And everybody should know that's good for national security. It's also good for the environment. And if you're somebody who really, really loves clean energy, you need to care about critical minerals too.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. So we're out of time, but what kind of pitch could you make at the end? What could be some parting thoughts that you feel strongly about?
I think, first of all, for anybody who's listening who's not in the environmental mainstream or finds themselves right of center or conservative, you need to make the environment a priority, because this is going to continue to be an issue. We're going to continue to live on this planet, and we're going to continue to have to make decisions about how to manage resources on this planet. And you've got to be at the table there to help make these decisions and drive policy. And I would add to make sure to do it in good faith, and to sort of meet people where they're at and try to build bridges and try to figure out what we can do to meet all of the needs of our children's future, one of which includes clean air, clean water, and a beautiful environment to hand down to them.
Perfect. Thank you. Andrew Sandstrom, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you guys.